technology. Hi, Mick.
What's up?
Welcome to Cyprus.
I'm excited to be here in Cyprus. Thanks for having me. It's beautiful.
Good to have you here. Well, your success is pretty known, and we heard it from Andreas, but if I asked you to name one thing, and one thing only, that helped you succeed, what would that be?
So growing up, I still love basketball, but I played a lot of basketball growing up, and I was actually really good. And my dad would have me play with people who were 3 or 4 years older, and I'd always play in the leagues that were well above my age. And sometimes when I played with these older kids, I would be really timid. I would be really scared. I was afraid to make mistakes. And so as I grew older, my dad would always try to tell me, he's like, don't be afraid to fail. It's okay if you make some mistakes. And I remember I would always read just books and other things before my games. And I remember one time my dad made a little bookmark, just a simple little bookmark that just said, don't be afraid to fail. And so it's a message that my dad has always tried to instill in me, is just don't be afraid to try stuff. Don't be afraid to go out on a limb. You might totally fall flat on your face, but it's okay. You can get back up and go after something else. So I would say the big thing for me is just a willingness to fail and being okay with that.
And when did this big journey start, your startup journey?
So my first entrepreneurial experience that I recall, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and we lived in a city that was really close to a university. And so there were a lot of students that lived around apartments and houses nearby where we lived. And there was a really popular video game console growing up at that time. It was called Super Nintendo, and I have no idea how many of you are familiar with Super Nintendo, but all of our friends had a Super Nintendo, and we really wanted a Super Nintendo. And my parents said, well, you guys got to figure it out on your own if you want a Super Nintendo. And so my 3 brothers and I, we had this idea of, what if we would knock on doors of the students at the university and say, we'll take out your trash, we'll take it to the dumpster, if you'll give us whatever change you have, nickels and dimes and quarters. And we did that, and we pounded the pavement, literally knocking on doors for an entire summer, earning enough that we could buy our Super Nintendo. And I remember the day we plugged it in, we invited all our friends over, and we turned it on, and we were so excited to take this thing for a ride, but we didn't realize we forgot games. We didn't have any games to plug in. And so my parents felt really bad, and they decided to buy Mario Kart and Street Fighter. So I became really good at those 2 games. But that was probably one of the first entrepreneurial experiences of just hustling, being scrappy, being creative, and creating value for other people.
Wow. Does it take a special person or a prodigy child, so to speak, to succeed in startups? And if so, what makes you special?
I don't think I'm anything special. I think, similar to the answer to my first question, I think it just takes somebody who's willing to try, somebody who's willing to do. I think it's very easy to get caught up in thinking about interesting ideas and thinking about what if and this and that, but entrepreneurs are people that just do. So I don't consider myself special or any sort of genius or prodigy or super smart. I work hard. And I see something I want to go after, and I go after it. And I think that's a similar trait of many entrepreneurs.
How hard was this journey for the people around you? You know, I know you have a wife and 2 kids, and soon to have a 3rd one, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How hard was it for them to go through this trip with you?
Yeah, so startups can be incredibly demanding, take a lot of time. I was fortunate to get started very early. So I dropped out of Princeton University after my first year and started this company called Zinch, which was the biggest success up to this point in my life. It was acquired for $45 million of a public company in the US. I was fortunate in that I didn't have kids then, and it was just, I eventually got married, and so it definitely takes somebody special in terms of the people around you, the family, your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be, because it does take a lot of time. I remember last year, I had an experience that I won't forget. My son, who was 3.5 at the time, last year, he said, "Daddy, why do you work so much?" And I was surprised. I don't know, I thought that he just sort of knew that I just worked and that was just the way life was. He said, "Why do you work so much?" And I said, "Well, you know, to provide and to give you good experiences and to buy toys and take you to Disneyland." I thought he would be thrilled with that answer. But he came back and he said, "Daddy, I don't want more toys. I want more of you." And I was like, whoa.
Ouch.
So, I mean, ever since that experience, I've I've thought, how can I restructure my life in a way that not only can I be a good entrepreneur, but also a good father, right? A good husband. I think
balance it.
Yeah, trying to find a good balance. And I think it's a struggle that I have every day and every week. There's no silver bullet to it, but it definitely requires a lot of sacrifice from the family.
So the unseen heroes.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the circle around you.
I agree.
I want to stick a bit on the special theme here. Is there a special gift in recognizing opportunity? I mean, how did you come up with the idea for Zinch? And at the end of the day, is it about the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much about startups and opportunities are about putting yourself out there, opening yourself up to interesting experiences. So my first week at Princeton University, and this is probably similar to every university, you'll be introduced to all the clubs and the organizations. And I remember we went to the gymnasium, and they had all the clubs and organizations had booths trying to have you sign up to join the club, et cetera. And I felt overwhelmed. I had a big pile of flyers and papers as I was walking out of the gym. But a really good-looking girl tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "Do you dance?" And I said, "Sure, I dance." I mean, I didn't really dance. I mean, I like to dance. I like to dance, but I wasn't like a trained dancer. And so I said, "Yeah, what's this all about?" I wanted to find more people like her. And she said, "Well, you should try out for Body Hype, which is one of the dance groups at our university." So long story short, I tried out, got in. But the point of the story was another person in Body Hype was somebody very similar to me, very entrepreneurial, and he and I started riffing on all these business ideas and whiteboarding out, problems to solve. And it was talking with him and thinking about the inefficiencies of education and college admissions in the US that led me to starting my first company. And so it all started with a tap on my shoulder saying, "Do you dance?" And the trajectory of my life totally changed. And so I think it's just about opening yourself up to new opportunities, meeting new people, and you just don't know where life can take you.
Absolutely, from a pretty girl to a special guy to a startup.
Exactly.
You sound very passionate about university admissions. Why is that?
So growing up, I never did super great on my tests. Like I said, I didn't feel like I was a genius or somebody
Says the one that was accepted
special
in Princeton.
I know, but I got into Princeton because I worked so hard at everything else in my life. And so basically, we felt like students needed to be seen for being more than just a test score. Because the way that recruitment works in the US is, these universities would buy test scores and test names of people who took these standardized tests. And we created a platform that enabled universities to look for and recruit students based on more than just a test score. And that's what we did. And students could upload videos and talk about their leadership and achievements. And I felt like that was me. I needed that. I wanted that. And so that's what ultimately helped us get it started.
Personal passion about the idea. Yeah. After your big success with Zinch, well, you didn't exactly lay back. Why on earth did you move on to do Undrip?
Yeah, I love the creation process. And for me, Zinch was getting very big. We were having lots of meetings. We had 80 employees at the time. We were acquired, and I just felt like I wasn't stretching myself. One of my mentors, a good friend of mine, he always says, the comfort zone is of the devil. And what he means by that is like always be stretching yourself, always be trying new things. And I felt like I was just getting in this mode with Zinch where everything was just status quo. I'd get home with no like super passionate ideas, and I told my wife, I'm like, I'm just not happy. I'm not getting stimulated intellectually. And she's like, don't leave. Everything's so well. You're getting paid so well.
Finally.
We just have a new kid. Everything's great. But ultimately, I was able to convince her to let me go after a new startup, and I did. And so Undrip was a product in the content discovery space, and so social media. And I didn't have any experience with social media or mobile. I was previously in education, and so it was really hard to raise funding for it. I spoke with over 100 investors, and they all said, yeah, you've had one success, but this is a whole new industry for you. I mean, we don't know if you can really pull this off. And we weren't going to let that stop us. So what we decided to do was we decided to create a music video. And I mean, the beauty of entrepreneurship is there are no rules. You can do whatever you want if it pleases you.
Make your own.
And so we made a music video. I had a rapper friend in LA, and he had a producer friend in LA, musician. So we made a really high-quality music video, and it was called We Need an Angel, like a business angel, like investors.
Literally.
Yeah, We Need an Angel. And we released it, and it got so much press, all the tech media, even some mainstream media. And people were like, wow, these people are really, these entrepreneurs are really creative, and a lot of people ended up investing in us just because they thought we were very creative, and we weren't going to let anything stop us. So we ended up raising $1 million, and then we were off to the races with Undrip.
That's making noise for you. So what happened after you raised the $1 million?
So, you know, the reality is a lot of startups fail. And Undrip, though the product was great, the reviews were great, we just couldn't find a business model. And we couldn't figure out a way to create a sustainable business. So we were basically running out of money, and we had to fire all our friends. My co-founder and I were left with a very tough moment of, do we shut the company down, or do we work on a new product and keep going? And so this was in 2013, and that was one of the hardest years of my life, I would say, just because I had come off this big success. I thought that, you know, I would just be great at everything and anything. I was very arrogant, but it totally floored me and humbled me in a way that has changed me. So we decided to keep going. We decided, like, these investors invested in us. We're not going to shut the company down. We're going to work on a new product. We're going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. That product failed, but the next one won't. And we've bounced back. We've worked on a new product called Spatch. We just raised, you know, more than $3 million in our seed round, and we're off to the races. But it was such a hard time, that sort of transition from shutting the product down and working on a new product.
This is something that when you're on the outside, you forget it. But startups are not an easy ride. It's just that when you're on the outside, you get to see the spotlights and the shiny part, just the success.
And even Zinch, my first company, was 6 years, right? That's no like overnight success. There were a ton of ups and downs there. Startups can be really hard, but somehow I just keep getting pulled back in.
I think this is the right time to ask you, what's your biggest regret or biggest mistake?
So I constantly make mistakes.
What did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly making mistakes. The thing is, I don't know if I would call any of those mistakes regrets, because I feel like I am a better entrepreneur because of them. I feel like I'm a better human being because of them. Like I said, going through that hard time with Undrip and transitioning, and I became much more empathetic. I became much more humble. I see other entrepreneurs struggling, and I want to go give them a hug. You know, I feel more like compassion for other entrepreneurs going through hard times. And so we made a lot of mistakes, but I don't think those are regrets. I think they've made me a better entrepreneur, and most importantly, a better human being.
If you lose, don't lose the lesson.
Yeah,
There's lessons everywhere. What's your benchmark, Mick? I mean, when we talk about startups, metrics and analytics are extremely important. You need to measure your growth, how fast you're growing, et cetera. But what is the one ultimate analytic that you know you can just wait for just another day? It's pivot or die.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, besides from running out of cash.
Yeah, so I think there's a few benchmarks that I like to use. I think on the one hand, if every night, so on the positive side, if every night when I'm going to bed, my mind is racing, right? Like I'm thinking about the exciting things I'm working on. And then when I wake up, as soon as I wake up, I realize I'm awake and I bounce off the walls, I bounce out of bed, I'm excited to work on what I'm working on. When I have that, I feel like I'm doing something right. I feel like I'm being successful, right? Because I'm happy, I'm excited to work on what I'm working on. And so that's one of the benchmarks I use for like, something's right with my life, because I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And then I think the inverse would be like, if I'm not happy, if I'm miserable, if I'm not getting stretched, I'm not getting stimulated, I'm not learning, I'm not progressing, then maybe that's a time to think about trying something else. Maybe it's time to hang up the jersey, hang up the shoes. And the other thing I'll say as well is I think sometimes in entrepreneurship, people can get so very obsessive about your idea and making it work and just like willing the thing to be a success, that it can come at the expense of more important things in life, right? Whether that's love, family, friends, leisure, whatever it may be. And if it becomes dangerous to your health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, at that point you might think like, okay, maybe you should do something else,
that's
right?
The analytic.
And so I think having people around you, people who care for your well-being, friends, family, is something you should always try to have. Because they'll see that. They'll be like, okay, this is getting out of control, and they'll help you through it. They'll have a startup intervention, I guess you could say.
Let me take you back a bit on the failure. How do you help it when things are not going well? From personalizing the failure into I'm a failure, a personal failure, instead of it's the startup that's failing, it's the business model, it's the business.
Yeah, I think that this is hard because when you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly thinking about it. It's wrapped around your very fiber, and so it's hard. But the reality is most startups do fail, and so you need to be careful to not let that failure make you feel like you're a failure. So I think it's important to have these other things outside of your startup, have hobbies, have family, have friends, have faith in something, right? Like I think that's important because that'll keep you grounded, that'll keep you having a good, fresh perspective. And so if and when possibly your startup does fail, you can move on. You can still live a wonderful life, right?
You've lived through both experiences of being a single founder and having co-founders. Which one do you prefer and why?
Yeah, so I think, startups are incredibly hard, like I've said 10 times already on stage. I feel like it's always better when you can share that burden with somebody. So have a co-founder, 2 co-founders, you have a shoulder to cry on, proverbially. It's very real, sometimes in a very literal sense. So I do think that it gets heavy that if you're the only one, the pressure, the burden, the stress. And so I would encourage people to try to find people that they love working with, who they trust, and who can share the burden. And the other thing I'll say about that is not just on the negative side, but on the positive side, when you have somebody who you can bounce ideas off of, and you can brainstorm together, and there's that healthy debate, ultimately, hopefully, the outcome is better, right? You've got multiple smart people thinking about things, and the outcome should be better, whether it's the product or the vision, whatever it may be.
I think it's pretty obvious by now that you cannot sit still, at least entrepreneurially wise. After Zinch, there wasn't Drip, and now it's Batch. What makes you a serial entrepreneur, always returning to the proverbial scene of the crime?
So I don't consider myself a serial entrepreneur. Even though I am that, I know that I am, but I consider myself more of an artist, as cheesy as that is. I want to paint the future. I want to build. I want to make. I'm a hacker. I love getting my hands dirty and messing around with stuff. And so, I don't know. For me, I like to solve problems. I like to create products that make people's lives better or more productive or happier in some way. So for me, I don't know. I feel like we're all meant to create. Not necessarily in a startup environment, but we are all meant to create and to build.
Mick, thank you so much. This has been a huge honor for me being on a TEDx stage with you. This was a crash course in seriously serial startupology. Wow. And true to our discussion title, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
And may the startup force be with you. Thank you.